Going back to episodic memory, though, it's interesting. I told you that they've replicated those studies over and over and over again. So strong is this research now that students taking the bar exam, if they request to study in the room where they're going to be tested, they have to be allowed to do so. That's how strong it is. So we just know, you can even, it's kind of funny, before the test, they always tell you to take down all your posters. You have to take down all the posters and cover it up. Isn't it interesting that they're still there? Because how many of you watch your students and they're sitting there looking at the wall and retrieving information? That's what they're doing. They're retrieving information because those posters that you have on the wall, that information that you have there, they're episodic memory, especially if you actually use the information on the wall. And there's a difference between having it up there and using it for a purpose. If you use it for a purpose, it creates stronger episodes. Same thing. Remember I said you as a teacher, you're an episode? Some teachers are stronger episodes than others. See if that makes sense. You see what I'm saying? See, the teacher that comes in and sits at their desk and passes out worksheets and then grades them and hands out more worksheets the next day, they're not so strong of an episode. But our friend back here, our high school friend, and then back here, and those of you who are doing interactive things with the kids, and you're up there and you're getting them engaged, you are a big episode. So you should feel better about yourself. You can go home and tell your husband, I'm a big episode. Don't you mess with me. All right? So I think how strong of an episode we are kind of varies. So let's go back to, we said that we almost have to be cheerleaders for our language. Okay? We have to love language. And one of the best activities that I have found is in the book under Plugging in History. And it is called Birth of a Word. But I want to begin by giving you a test again. You don't have to write this down. We'll have an oral test. It was right here in Dallas, just down the road at Intercontinental Hotel when I first did this test. I gave it to a group of teachers. And it's interesting to see how things have changed in just a short amount of time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some words. Because what I do with my students at the very beginning of the year is I ask them to create an adult-free dictionary. An adult-free dictionary. Create a dictionary of words that you don't think anybody over 40 will know. And you know what's interesting? I thought 40 was a good age to pick. They think 20 is old. When the fifth graders I'm working with, they really do. And they say, well, Miss, you mean as old as you? And I say, you are not 9, okay? You're not 9. But these, so the kids write this adult-free dictionary, and I create at the same time a kid-free dictionary. And that kind of moves along. I mean, that's not what we're doing right now, but I'm just going to tell you how this came about. So my kid-free dictionary, I put words in there like ice pick. Kids don't know ice. They don't know ice box either. Go put that in the ice box. Like, what are you talking about? So on this is a list that actually came from some kids that they thought were adult-free words. But at this point now, you know most of them. But let's just have a little test here. Of course, bling bling. Now the directions were to write the word. Okay, write the definition. Use it in a sentence. Bling bling. Fishing. Blogosphere. Props. Not items used for drama production. Grill. Has nothing to do with cooking. Now, one of my middle school principals she was always been an elementary principal. This year, she moved to middle school. She told me she never knew what a grill was until this year. She now has 6 of them in her office. All right, now some of you are saying, well, why would you have grills in your office? Okay, what, are you going to be cooking? What's going on here? All right, just kind of a show of hands for a moment. How many of you, if I gave you a test, could definitely tell me the definition of bling bling? All right, very good. 2 years ago, nobody raised their hand. Interesting. Now you see it. I even saw it on a bulletin board on the way here. Right? Everywhere. Fishing. How many of you could give me a definite definition of fishing? All right, 1. Okay, blogosphere. Okay, handful. Props. If you watch American Idol, that's a given. Okay. All right, and how about grill? Most of you know grill? All right, well, let's look at this. Because some of you, I'm about to increase your vocabulary. How many of you don't know any of them? Oh, very good. That's perfect. I love it. Well, when I was in Dallas two years ago and we looked at bling bling, there was a lady who was willing to share her definition in her sentence. She said, well, I think it has something to do with elevators. And her sentence was, as I went up the elevator, I heard a bling bling and became frightened. All right, well, now I had to help her out, and it's disappeared, but I had this big spinner necklace that I put on. Because bling bling is flashy, gaudy jewelry. Okay, and it has morphed now even to just be anything flashy, right? Anything kind of extravagant. So bling bling is, of course, a word. And when I ask the kids, is bling bling a vocabulary word? And here's the exact response from them. Psst. I do that, okay? Psst. No, it's not a vocabulary word. I said, well, really? It was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in March of 2003. Now, I didn't say the American Heritage Dictionary. Okay, it was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in March of 2003. Does that then make it a vocabulary? Well, of course they say. If it's in the dictionary, it must be a vocabulary. And I think this is what brings up the wonderful discussion about scholarly language and scholarly vocabulary versus neighborhood vocabulary. Because bling bling is a great word. And there are times when you would want to use it. There are times when my car, if it would break down at midnight, I would want to change my vocabulary. I would not want to say, oh, look, my vehicle has stopped progressing. I wonder if I can solicit some assistance. There are times when you want to use it. And I think it's incredibly important that we understand that we don't tell kids their vocabulary is bad or wrong. Because it's not bad and it's not wrong. But there's a time to use it and a time not to. I would never, in a million years. Now, by the way, I love the word bling bling. I think it works great in some poetry. It has the certain rhythm and rhyme that's perfect. But I would never walk into my superintendent's office and say, Miss Kajal, you give me a little more bling bling, I'll give you a little more think think. All right? It ain't happening. Okay? So I know better than that. Okay? So I know the difference between the scholarly language that you want to use in many situations versus the neighborhood language that I would use maybe even with my friends and neighbors that I'm around. Okay? Fishing, this is fun. All right, and I'm just going to go quickly through these now. Blogosphere, I love this. I'd say 5 years ago, I heard blog, and I was like, what is that? And now you see it everywhere. Many of your students have blogs, their own personal blog, where it's an online diary journal. Blogosphere is the network of all these blogs. Props, of course. What's props, guys? It's a compliment, like Randy Jackson on American Idol. He goes, I've got to give you your props. Right? Proper respect is actually what comes. Okay, proper respect. And then grill. What's grill? Yeah, it's a tooth. It's a things that you can even go to the dentist and have them put it in there semi-permanently. Scary. We had some kids that had them, and the little officer on the campus said, you need to take that out. And he goes, it's permanent. And the officer said, it's going to be unpermanent. You need to go to your dentist and you need to have it removed because we're not wearing that. Okay? And that's where this middle school principal she said she has 6 of them in a jar. I mean, not a jar, in her drawer in her office. Okay? These little grills that they just slip up. Now, much of this language is in the ESL world, what we call BICS, right? It's that social language. And so the kids are going to naturally have the social language, and we have to transfer them into the CALPS. We need to transfer into the academic language, the scholarly. The whole thing I'm trying to get kids to understand and to try to get them addicted to language is that they are creating the new vocabulary for the future. Does that make sense? The words that they're coming up with, the words they're creating, are going to be in the dictionary in the future. And so words are important, and I want them paying attention to it. Some of you kept up with Robert McNeil's series a couple of years ago called History of the English Language. And his sequel to that just came out last year is Do You Speak American? Do You Speak American? PBS series. And what he's basically saying and sharing with us is that there's a much difference between English and American. And my father is British, and I will tell you, he definitely thinks that Americans sometimes speak a different language. Right? And what's happening is, who is driving the innovation of the language? The Americans. Okay? The Americans are the ones that are adding all of those new words. 6,000 new words were added to that new Oxford English Dictionary in 2003. 6,000! That's a lot of new words, isn't it? Now, where do those new words come from? And this is what I brainstorm with the kids. This is where I start. Where do new words come from? Okay, some of them will come from slang, or a lot of it will come from slang, like make job. Technology is a big one. Foreign language, definitely. Okay, the medical industry brings in lots of new words. Now, see, we could just do the activity, but I'm telling you, I'm creating an episode for you by telling you these things, all right? I'm helping you. All right, when I was here in North Texas, now, so anybody from Houston? Or you have some connections with Houston? All right, when I was here at North Texas, okay, in Denton, you can see there's a lot of them. See this big stack here? Bless my mother's heart. She had the empty nest syndrome after we left. And as soon as we left, she signed up to help at the high school. Okay, the high school in the neighborhood. Oh, goodness. She had access to the laminating machine. All right? So I would get these things in the mail, and they came out of the Houston Post. That doesn't even exist anymore. Came out of the Houston Post, and it was a little article called Word for Word. And this guy would give the history of words through pictures. So like this one is Cheshire, and he would tell where Cheshire comes from in a little picture that there's no way you can forget. It's good fun. And she would send me these often. And the only reason, because I was a music major, the only reason I didn't throw them away is because they were laminated. All right? So I threw them all in this box. And then when I started teaching English, I kind of came across it, deciding, what to throw away and what not to. And I said, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. Because you know what these are? These are birth announcements. Think about it for a second. These are birth announcements for words. So the name of this activity is Birth of a Word. Because I want kids understanding that words are always being born, but they're being born for a reason. And so we're analyzing and paying attention to language. And I'm just going to show you what I'm talking about. Is it true that words have birthdays? Can words have birthdays? Sure. I'm just going to prove it to you. I'm going to show you some famous birthdays. Blooper, 1937. Clone, 1903. Mayday, 1927. Thug, I love this. Thug is a very old word. Thugs have been around a long time. All right? And thug, 1839. Limousine, 1902. Nightmare, very old word. Okay, about 1290. And love, very, very old. Okay, enduring. It's about 725. All right? So these are some famous birthdays. And I actually got these. You can find them. When I started doing this, they weren't as prevalent on the internet. But a history of English in its own word. And it gives the word and it gives its relative birthday. You can now do this online. It's wonderful. And do a search of the word and it'll tell about the first time it was used. All right? Well, irritable problem with this book is, though, the last entry is 1979. We've had lots of words added since 1979. So I want my kids to, and here's what they're going to do. The students are going to create a birth announcement for a word, a recent word that's been added to our language. The neat thing is, if you teach math, when we do this with content area teachers, if you teach math, you have them do a math word. If you teach science, you do a science word, and like that. But for language arts, we kind of get them all. It's kind of fun. Any new word that's less than 50 years old in our language, that's what they're going to create the birth announcement. So let me show you an example. Announcing the arrival of the latest member of the lexicon family, mouse potato, was born in 1993. Proud single parent, writer Alice Kahn. Weight, heavy in the technology area. Sibling, couch potato. Characteristics, noun, used to describe someone who spends a lot of time at the computer. That is a mouse potato. And it is a new word. Tons of new words. How about this one? Fur kid. Fur kid. Some of you have a fur kid at your home. It's a pet that you treat like a child. Any of you have a fur kid? I work with a lady. Her dog has a whole room to himself. Okay? That is definitely a fur kid. Well, what do you have to do? Well, first of all, you need to talk to kids about what's in a birth announcement. A lot of kids know, but some of them have no clue what's in a birth announcement. What's in a typical birth announcement? Name, date, age, weight, sibling, character. Yeah, kind of, blonde hair, blue eyes, looks just like her daddy. Yay. I mean, they're all so different. But bring some in, let students look at it. And then they're going to do the research. Now, the neat thing about this is it's really research. So they're researching the information, they're having to look at the characteristics, and then they're creating something with it that shows their learning. And the neat thing about this, I have kids come up to me afterward and they said, "You have ruined me." And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't sound promising. I'm like, well, what do you mean? They said, "I can't look at a word without thinking about its birthday." I'm like, well, when did that word come about? Well, when did that word, I wonder why that word came about. So the neat thing is, without even you telling them to, it causes them to pay attention to words. So birth of a word has just been absolutely wonderful. And here's one, poop fiction. Okay, and they just had to add the toilet paper roll. Oh, this is a favorite. Announcing the arrival of Rap Raid. WRAP. Okay, born November 7th, 2003, only child of James Moore of the Daily Telegraph. Weight heavy in the CD industry. Siblings, packaging rage, can't open the package rage. Characteristics noun, extreme anger caused by product packaging that is difficult to open or manipulate. All right? So then what happens, we put these up and the kids, it's great fun for them. They're researching about language and seeing that words are constantly entering into our language. Because the bottom line is, if we can get kids, or if we can show how motivated or excited we are about their language, and the language that's current, it's easier to take them back and get them to learn words that we want them to learn, such as infinitesimal and font, and even in some cases words like diagram, the simplest of words. When I do this at campuses, we actually go to the computer lab and look at these websites. Now, I will give the warning, we all know that anytime you're looking on the line, you have the danger of coming across, well, things you don't want your kids to do, all right? Like man breath. All right, I was at a campus, okay? And it wasn't kids, thank goodness, but it was the group of teachers, and they did man breast, and then the area superintendent walked in as they were presenting. And man breast is not the word I would have chosen to do, but it is a new term. The importance of this, before I give you these websites, there are two groups of people sitting in this room. None is negative or overly positive. It's just that's the way it is, all right? Two sets of people. Some of you in here are prescriptionists. Some of you in here are descriptionists. Now let me tell you what I mean by that. Because what I fully believe as teachers is we have to be both. All right? In Do You Speak American, they have a wonderful interview with one of the editors of the Oxford English Dictionary. And this editor of the Oxford English Dictionary, when they run across him, you know where he is? He's up in one of the libraries in New York, and he's thumbing through magazines. Now, wouldn't this be a grand job? I'm in the wrong field. His job is to pick up magazines, blues magazine, cosmetology magazine, and read through them and find uses of new words. When he finds a new word, he logs it into a database. And then they look for future uses of that word. So once it's been used many times, it hits the dictionary. So prescriptionist, descriptionist. Let me tell you what that is, because this is where this editor came into the discussion. He says that he is a descriptionist, and he feels that's the job of the dictionary. That his job is not to tell people how to use language. His job is not to say, you have to use this word, any other word is horrible. His job is to tell how language is being used. Does that make sense? To describe how language is being used. On the other hand, there are the language mavens and those that instead of telling how language is being used, they would rather say how language should be used. Does that make sense? And those are the ones that say our language is going to, hell in a handbasket, and if we don't stop this now, we'll have no good language left at all. It's embarrassing, really. And I think, again, as teachers, we have to say, you know what? It is our job to prescribe. It is our job to say in certain settings, you need to use standard language. You need to use standard English language, or you won't get a job, or you won't get the scholarship, or you won't get this or that. So in one sense, we have to be prescriptionists, don't we? And then at the same time, we have to understand the descriptionist side. We have to understand the reality of how language is being used so that we can bridge the gap. Because I think most of us know how language is being used. We hear it in the hallway, and we hear it in the restrooms when kids think we're a student. We experience in all different realms, but we have to bridge the gap. Does that make sense? All right, so keep that in mind as you're presenting this activity, because we don't want our kids to think because we shared with them bling bling as a vocabulary word that they should be using it in all of their papers, right? But there's a time. So where are the new words? Here's where they were for up to 1979, and then check this out. You're going to want to get, not this one, but one line, right? New words. All those 6,000 new words that were added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2003, right here. And I love it right here, the subtitle, which is the whole reason I bought the book. They still have that new word smell. Isn't that great? See, because you could have that bulletin board up in your room, they still have that new word smell for all of their birth announcements. Right? It would be a perfect little bulletin board. But this is where all the new words are. Now, warning, 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 warning. There are some words in here, again, that you don't want kids to be exposed to. So a couple of options. As teachers, you can just Xerox a couple of the A pages, a couple of the B pages, a couple of the C pages, and just create your own classroom-appropriate. Orrin Hargraves is a collector. He brought the words together, all right, from all those sources. Now, obviously, this book alone isn't going to do it. And if you have computers in your classroom, then here's another source. So look on page 144. My favorite website it's the next one from the bottom, and it's wordspy.com. www.wordspy.com. I must warn you ahead of time so you don't email me hate mail. It is addictive. So if you're sitting there looking through it at night, you will be there a while. Because you can even go by themes. So you put in topics. You put in technology, and it pulls up all the new words for technology. So the sole purpose of that website is to be on the lookout for new words. It gives the word, bling bling is a noun, expensive or gaudy jewelry worn in excessive amounts, a flashy or tasteless display of wealth, also bling bling or just bling. All right? In circles where these things matter, and it gives example citations, and then the earliest citation. In circles where these things matter, there's some debate around the question of who exactly coined the term bling bling. Most point the finger at a gentleman by the name of Baby Gangsta who plies his trade with a group called Cash Money Millionaire. All right? Now, and it goes into a little more detail, and then they give the citing of where it appeared. Now, all of these sightings are in print sightings. That's what indicates their birthday. Who first used it orally? Who knows? A couple of things. You can just, again, print out several. Print out some of the ones you really want them to pay attention to, like RAM, hard drive. Those words did not exist previously. Road rage, definitely. Road rage, and that's one that's safe for kids to do. So pull those sightings up and put them around the room and let the kids dig. I think high school, I don't have any, I think high school they're fine with digging. I think some levels of middle school are fine with digging. You could have them brainstorm their list first and then do a Google search for those words versus just digging randomly, because I think that's when we get in trouble. Oh, look what's here, booger picker. And they come up with things that just kind of get things off track. But it's a wonderful activity. I think you'll love it. But again, we always have to keep in mind this. What is our purpose? Why are we doing it? Not just because it's fun, okay? Because it's not about being fun. It's about moving kids forward in vocabulary. What is our purpose? And our purpose is twofold. One, our purpose is exposure. It's exposure in the ear. Is it also analysis? Are you analyzing these new words? Oh, definitely. All right? It's not review. And that's the one piece of the ear that's missing, but that's okay because that's not our purpose. All right? The other purpose is to motivate kids in language. It makes them pay attention to words. Once we can get kids paying attention to words, no matter how we have to do it, then we have them. And then no matter what kind of activities we do, there's a reason behind it that they're willing to follow out. All right? Okay. So is that useful? Is that something you can use? And what the neat thing about we being, those of us in here, being master teachers, you can take the pieces of it you want. All right? You might just want to talk about new words. You might just want to talk about words like bling bling being vocabulary. But we can take it to the level that we want. One of the things we know that's important in teaching and learning is to understand that the body loves movement. Okay, we need movement. And I think with No Child Left Behind and all the testing pressures, that recess was the first to go in many cases. But there's so much support behind movement. And one of those researchers, you can see I love this book, it's called Smart Moves. It's called Smart Moves by Carla Hannaford. And what she shows is that memory is enhanced by movement. We remember things based on movement. And if you think about it, when you wake up in the middle of the night, most of us don't turn on our light to go to the restroom or whatever. We just, well, except in my case where I've junk all with oh God. But most of us just go to the restroom because we know where it is, because of that memory. All right? But if you go out of town and you stay at a hotel, you kind of get confused sometimes, and you have to have that light on. So movement is crucial. But sometimes we need to move just to wake things up. So we've been talking about birth of a word. We're getting ready to go back to memory. So we want to shake things up. So here's what I need you to do. Take your finger, right finger, put it in your neighbor's ear. Don't do that. I'm just kidding. All right. Take your right finger, and if you will, write your first name in cursive. All right, now with your left finger, write your first name in cursive. Take your right foot, all right, and put it up in the air. Higher, higher, higher. It's really hard on the chair. You should try that sometime. All right, now write your name in cursive with your big right toe. All right, now put your left foot up in the air. All right, higher, higher, higher. All right, now write your name in cursive with your big left toe. I'm going to move down here where it's more solid. All right, some of your names just got shorter. I saw that. I really did. All right. Oh, thank you. Goodness. Now, with your booties, and this is backed by research. Okay, no pun intended. This is backed by research. With your booties, write your name in cursive. Dot that. Now, what you just did, you're the best booty writers I've seen in a long time, by the way. Okay, it's quite good. What you've done, though, is you've re-energized your right and left hemisphere. All right, and it's brain-based. But sometimes, did you feel the energy shift? See, what happens in learning, you're burning chemicals in your brain, and you have to rejuvenate that. There's only 3 ways to rejuvenate chemicals in your brain that have been lost. 1 is to sleep. There's no time for that. Okay, no sleeping. The second is to eat a meal full of protein. Well, that hasn't happened yet. That's coming. But some of you may have other things at lunch, all right, that may make you a little sleepy in the afternoon. The third way to bring back those endorphins and those chemicals that have been burned is to move. So it's so important in our classroom to move and re-energize the memory. Okay, go ahead and have a seat. Now, I was on a critical thinking training team at Louisville High School, and when we would present some of these things, there's always a group. Now, being a former high school person, I can tell you this. All right, I can say it. But everybody just have a moment with me. Cross your arms like this. Okay? You must take your tongue in front of your teeth like this. You know that look, don't you? It's a crap alert. It's like, you know what, lady? I've got curriculum to cover. I don't have time for booty riding or anything like that. All right? I've got to do Beowulf for 6 weeks. All right? And it's all about Grendel. And we don't have time for that wiggling stuff. Well, the bottom line is, if we really know about how kids learn, we don't have time not to. Because while I'm going on with, wonderful things about adjectives and adverbs, 5 girls are with me at the front of the classroom, and the others are drooling. So if I don't stop and re-energize them and do what's right, I'm wasting the time that I do have. So I think that's part of what we have to be about with the brain research that's out there, is first of all, to read it carefully. Okay. Second of all, to read it. And then third of all, to apply it in the classroom. Because you have 3 groups of people dealing with brain research. And by the way, everything that we know now about teaching and learning in the brain has come about in the last 15 years. When we were in school, the research wasn't even out. So we can't say, well, our teachers didn't, or I learned this way. They didn't know. Okay, they didn't know. Matter of fact, it wasn't until 1989 that Congress declared that the 90s would be the decade of the brain. And they pumped thousands and thousands, millions actually, of dollars into that research. And now we know so much more. Such to the degree we know we have arts with the brain in mind, language and memory with the brain, and now they've even taken it down. David Souza has how the special need brain learns. So our kids that have dyslexia and dysgraphia and behavior problems, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, how is their brain different? How can we teach in such a way that makes it stick? So the bottom line is we are the medical profession of education. Does that make sense? I mean, most of us, anybody go to the doctor over the holidays? Okay, Tracy, you went to the doctor. How silly would it have been if when you went to the doctor, if you walked in and they said, Tuesday, today's antibiotic day. I love antibiotics. It's my favorite. It's my favorite medication of all, and I'd love to give it. So I'm glad you're here today on Tuesday, and take this antibiotic and call me tomorrow feeling better. Wouldn't that be silly? What they do is they bring us in, they check us out, they see what we need, and then they provide that. And that's what it's about being a master teacher these days. We have to be about triage, seeing what the kids need, and then altering our instruction accordingly. And what most of our kids need today, our kids today are visual learners, visual kinesthetic learners. Many of them don't get it orally. We give them the directions, and we say it, but it just doesn't seem to stick. All right? But they're very bright. So what we have to do is not look at our learning style. We have to look at their learning style. Because I think that's uncomfortable sometimes, isn't it? Right? We're like, oh, that's not me. That's not me. But the trick is that it's not about us, it's about them. And so we have to really look at how they learn. And there are some kids out there that do learn very well with hearing. They hear it once, and they run with it. All right? So as we go through the rest of these activities, you want to keep all those things kind of bouncing around in your head about the learning styles, about how the brain learns, and then also about that ear. The whole reason you come to experience this with us today is so you can kind of model through some of these, so we can go through it. And I really do believe the learning is in the doing. That it's always different once you see it in a group setting and you can dialogue and have conversations about it and then take it back into your classroom. What we're going to do, here's how the word storm works. And do write on it. You'll want to write on this. And remember, I gave you an extra copy. For today, our word storm is going to be music term. Music term. And when you think about a storm, often, especially a storm in Houston, sometimes they're very quick, aren't they? You know, a little storm comes and then it's gone. So this is intended to be quick. It's also intended to be diagnostic. But what I don't want to do right now is debrief the activity when we haven't even done it. So I don't want to talk about what it is and what it can be. I want us to do it. And then we'll talk about all those uses and why something so simple can actually be very complex. So we're going to do a music term. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes. In reality, it'll be about a minute. But it'll make you feel better. All right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And I want you to just word storm, which is brainstorm, all the words you can think of that have anything to do with music. And then I want you to put it in the appropriate column. Is it 1 syllable, 2 syllable, 3 syllable, 4 syllable? Hence the reason for doing the syllable squat first with your kids, right? Because they need to know where to place it. So about a minute and a half. I'm going to quit talking now so that your brain can go in another direction. And again, the modeling is important with kids. If you just tell them that, some of them are going to write song lyrics across. So make sure you model first and say, for instance, guys, I would pick something very simple. So I can do it. Drum. Drum, it would be a music term, wouldn't it? And where would that go? In the first column. So you would write drum. And then if you still have a kid looking at you with that look, you know which look I'm talking about, like I still don't get it? Then give them one more sample and be done with it. All right. All right, so here we go. 1.5 to 2 minutes, and go ahead, and this is a private moment. Okay, tell the kids, private moment. You have to do this on your own, and then we'll get to talking about it. Go ahead, 1 minute. First of all, it needs to be a short amount of time. 1.5 minutes to 2. If you do less than that, then the kids don't have time to even adjust and focus into the activity. You know what I'm talking about. When you have kids start doing something, it takes them a little settle time. If you give them too much more than that, then they become dulled by it. And they're like, I'm finished, miss, what do you want me to do? So don't give them enough time to complete themselves, if that makes sense. All right, 2 minutes works perfect. The other thing is it needs to be the same amount of time every time you do it. Let's say after 6 weeks I do the exact same thing again, and I want to see their music term. If I'm doing it for diagnostic purposes, is it important that it's the same amount of time? Yes, because obviously if I give them 20 minutes the next time, okay, they would get more words. Okay, so the same amount of time each time, because this will be used and can be used for diagnostic purposes, okay, for growth in the amount of words that they need. All right? So now what I'd like you to do is draw a heavy line under the last word in every column. This is an example from a 5th grade class when they were doing science. You see that heavy blue line? Okay, draw a heavy line under the last word in every column. Guys, you have so many words. I was walking around, I saw some incredible words. You guys know so much. But now we're going to see if we can extend that. Because remember, we've talked about vocabulary being a social act, that you learn more words by talking with one another. So now we're going to do what Australians call, they go on a walkabout. Does anybody know anything about an Australian walkabout? What do they do in an Australian walkabout? Yeah, they just go walking, kind of get in tune with what they see around them, nature. Wow, never noticed before. It's a nice tree. Well, they go on these little walkabouts. And we're going to go on a walkabout as well, but ours is going to be an academic walkabout. So what I'd like you to do is take your word storm, it's something to write with, and I would like you to quietly walk around the room, and you are going to borrow words from one another. I don't want you to borrow more than one word from each person. So I don't want you to borrow all of your words from one person. By the way, that's very important because it will extend what they know. In other words, watch this. If this person over here knows a lot about instrumental music, their words are going to be very similar. And this person knows a lot about vocal music, or this person knows a lot about guitar. You see what I'm saying? If they get words from one another, they're hearing the other person's list and they're getting exposed to so much more. All right, so here's your challenge. I challenge you to add 3 words to your list that was not there previous. Now, you know kids, they're going for the big one. Right? They're going for the big ones. There's always one that'll just quick one and sit down, but most of them really want big words. Right? So we're going to go ahead and stand. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Once you get your 3 words, then you can go ahead and have a seat. Right? Now, there really are not very many music terms that have 6 syllables. Now, you can combine, though, and say, this were one kid, a very sharp kid. He said, well, romantic, period. Romantic, period. Well, yeah, that works. It's really 2 words, but think about it. I would count it because they have to go together. You see what I'm saying? Romantic by itself means something completely different. So I allowed it, but I thought it was quite nice that he had it on his list. He said, no, I feel I should be able to have this. Okay? And, of course, I allowed him to because he defended himself quite well. All right, so here's what happens then. You've now added words to your list. And I asked the students if we even wanted to add more words to our list. And you've given everything that you had up here. You've borrowed from friends. Where else could we add words? Yeah, dictionary, the classroom. See, these kids wanted to run into their science room. We were in their language arts classroom. They wanted to run to the team right across the hall and go to the science room. So sometimes when you say science words, the kids will actually go to their science classroom. Not physically, but mentally they'll visualize that science classroom. And that's exactly the way the memory is. The other thing to keep in mind, and I tell the students so they don't feel uncomfortable if they don't have very many words initially, is that you know far more words than you put down. So isn't that true? You guys know far more music words than you wrote down. But remember, it's not about storage, it's about retrieval. How easily were you able to retrieve the words that you know? That's the problem with some of our kids. They know lots of words. They can't retrieve them when they need them, which is the importance of vacuuming up residue. The importance of, remember I said the R was missing in most classrooms on the ear? That's why we have to keep going back and having them pull those words to the surface. What happens in our closet is when we clean it out, hopefully what we do is go through some kind of process and we say, if I haven't worn it in a while, right, then I'll get rid of it. 8 years is kind of a given for me. If I haven't worn it in 8 years, chances are I'm not going to. So it's sad, but I have to put them away, right? So our brain does the same thing. It goes through, and if it hasn't used something in a while, first of all, it kind of suppresses it, and after a while it'll be harder and harder to retrieve. So it's so important that our kids get, and you know what, that is 4th grade teachers, 3rd grade teachers, 5th grade, 6th grade teachers. That's why it is so important that allow kids opportunities to write. If we don't give them enough opportunity to write and speak, they don't get to rehearse all these spelling and vocabulary words we're giving them. No wonder they don't stick. How can they? All right? So those years that the writing is not tested is just as important that kids are writing for multiple reasons. All right? But there's your evidence as to why to anybody that says, well, no, we're not going to focus on that because of this test. Your evidence is so important for the vocabulary if they're actually practicing writing. Going back to this activity for a moment, look at what you did. First of all, go to the ear. Were you exposed to new words? Which part of the activity were you exposed to new words? The walkabout, all right? The walkabout, and that is so important, okay, that you're being exposed to other people's experience and words. Because often when they share the new word with them, the kids will say, well, what is that? And they have this little dialogue. In that moment, that dialogue, they're creating episodes. And they remember it not because of the definition, but because of something their peer told them or a conversation that ensued from the folks that were standing around. All right? Is it analysis? Analysis in what way? Syllables and content again. Okay? Syllable and content. And then is it rehearsal and review? Yes. Because they're bringing forward these words that they already know. So this is one of those activities that meets all 3 and is definitely episodic. It is one of the strongest, and it's so simple. As a matter of fact, you don't even have to Xerox anything. You get a piece of paper, you fold it into 6, then you have them right at the top, 1 syllable, 2 syllable, 3 syllable. And I was presenting at one of my schools, It was first grade bilingual teachers. I didn't know that till I got, okay? First grade bilingual teachers. And they said, well, my kids, they don't know syllables. Well, that is great because you don't have to do syllables. And as some of your beginning ESL kids, change it instead to 1 letter, 2 letters, 3 letters, 4 letters, 5 letters, 6 letters for your primary grade level and kids that can't do syllables. They're not quite there. Right? Now, here's the most fun of all. This is great to do this for music or science or any of the content areas. But for language arts, it is so incredible what you can do with this. And I'm going to give a couple of suggestions, and I want you to take a 2-minute talk with the folks sitting around you and say, what are the different ways you can do the word storm? In other words, you can use it for word pattern, parts like a long I word. Guys, all the words I want you to do today, they need to be long I word pattern. Okay? And I think that's important for all grade levels, not just your younger elementary. Right? You can also say all the words that you put on your word storm today, we're going to word storm words that have a. Okay, I want you to do all the words today. And you can't put the same prefix in any one column. You following me? All right? So otherwise, because they'll go crazy on just pre. Pre this, pre that, pre the other, and that doesn't really do too much because they already know what pre is. Does that make sense? Okay? But you be the boss of that. All right? I tell them I don't want more than one in a column. I'll give you one more, and then I'm going to go to you can do a word storm for all character traits. And you could do one for a character trait for one particular novel that you're working with. Right? And now I'm going to let you take 2 minutes and come up with all the different ways that you could do it. All right? At some point, you want to come back and repeat one you've done, or you can't see growth. Because guys and everybody, I know you're already brainstorming. I'm going to push the pause button on your brainstorm for a moment. Okay? What is going to happen the next time the students, let's say you guys, you come back in 3 weeks and we do the word storm for music again, what's going to happen ideally? All the words that are beneath the line are going to rise up and they're going to be from your initial memory, and then you'll have more to add. So as you go along, the list is going to get more and more full. And I've actually had a kid who in the middle of the word storm said, I need another piece of paper. I need another piece of paper. Now, I have to be honest with you, it was the first column that filled up, but they couldn't do that in the beginning, so it's growth. And you can show measurable growth in these words, and really for the kids it's a challenge, and all kids love it. Right? They love that challenge out. All right? So 2-minute talk, and then we'll share, and you can add what other people have said, and then we'll be ready to go on to another plug-in. 2-minute talk. Does everybody understand what you're talking about? You're going to brainstorm other ways, other word storms that you could do that are appropriate for your grade level and your subject area. So what's one idea that we can add? What's another word storm that you can do that has to do with a subject area? Word storm for what? Yeah, just your different spelling words, okay? The different spelling words from the kids' list. Have them put it in the appropriate column. What else? Parts of speech. There you go. Guys, everything on your list today, I want it to be an adjective. I want it to be an adjective. What else? Yeah, geographic terms, definitely. Holiday word, very good. Literary term, definitely. One that always comes up is different words for said, different words for walk. All right, so I think you're getting the idea. Now, one further step, and then we'll move on, because you could beat a dead horse. I think what has to happen is, first of all, you do it just to get the feel for doing it, and don't do too much. But what happens if you don't add something each time, if you don't add more depth, then it just becomes, oh, there we go, we're going to do that word. All right. After we've done it 2 or 3 times, first of all, I kind of add a new challenge. I say, guys, when you do your walkabout today and you add the words that you didn't previously have on your list, I'm going to add a new level. None of the words you add beneath the line can you add unless you know what they mean. So if you don't know what the word is, like I bet some of you wrote down some music terms, you have no idea what it is. Anybody? Be willing to admit that you copied down a word somebody had, but you didn't know what it meant? The kids do that all the time, fortissimo. Some kid will tell them, well, fortissimo, and they'll write it down, and then I'll look at it and say, well, what is that? I don't know. He wrote it. I got it from Bill. All right? So your challenge is then, you can't write down a word you don't know what it means. Now, do I have time in my life to give all my kids a test over all the words they write down? Oh, no. So that's where I'm monitoring, and I'm walking around the room, and I'm watching what they're writing down, and I say, oh, look, this is a great word. What does that mean? And they look at me like, oh, no, she's serious. All right? Well, I don't know. And I said, well, you know what? Let's just mark it off. Okay, let's mark it off, and I'm going to put my signature next to it. But if you discover what it means, let's add it back. All right? So it takes more time, that time that you do it, because you want to have dictionaries around the room, have your computers booted up to dictionary.com, and give them a lot more time to explore. It also takes a lot more time when you're talking to somebody. Well, tell me, what does word system mean? Because if I don't know what it means, she's not going to let me add it. And so it takes a little bit more time. Does that make sense? But at some point, it's not just about being able to write words on a chart. They need to know what it means. So the next strategy that we're going to do one more before lunch, is called word connection. It is still kind of focusing in on memory. It is higher level learning and connections at a deep, deep level. Some of you will relate to this. Okay? We know that the earth revolves around the sun. Ancient sailors knew the directions east and west because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And the teacher says, oh, good work. But more precise navigation was done using the stars. Now, what do you think of when you hear the word? What do you think of when you hear the word Polaris? There you go. Here are the kids. Ready? Snow machine. And the teacher kind of, a little frustrated. As my science professor said, the best way to learn is by word association. All right? And that's exactly the best way to learn, by association. Because what happens when new information comes in, it has to stick to previously learned information. That's the problem with rote memory. See, rote memory, it doesn't stick to anything. It just kind of swirls around, and then there's this huge, massive toilet flush, and it goes down the drain. So we have to have a way to hang on to it, which is the importance of word connections. Now, you have 2 copies in your handout. We're going to stick with the music theme, if you don't mind. Okay, on your sample, write the word crescendo. Crescendo. C-R-E-S-C-E-N-D-O. Here's the neat thing about this activity. This activity can't be done if kids don't know the definition of the word. Go back to the overhead method. Could you do the activity and never learn the word? Yes. Can't do it here. You absolutely can't do this if you don't know the definition. So before you begin, you have 2 options. You give students the word and the definition, or you give kids the word and they look up the definition. Now, I've got to say something about that. If dictionary skills is not your objective, just give them the definition. But if dictionary skills is part of your objective, then they need to look it up. Does that make sense? But we don't need them to look it up just because. Right? If it really is your objective is for them to learn the word, give them the definition. All right. So the word is crescendo, and my music friends in the house, what does that mean? Yeah, gradually get louder. So you start off soft and you gradually get louder. Kids, write the definition underneath the word to gradually get louder. Characteristics of the word. I ask my students that I'm working with not to do that portion until we're finished with the exploration. But here's, so I can tell you ahead of time what you're looking for. Characteristics of a word is just like character traits. If I say, how is that character as a character, what kind of things could you point out? The way they look. Let's take Harry Potter for a moment. If I were to describe Harry Potter as a character, what could I talk about? His size, the way he looks, his personality, his scars for how he looks, but what are the big ticket general categories? How he looks, how he acts, where he's from, what are you saying? Yeah, things that he says, right? So I tell them it's the same for words. They're like characters. So when we get finished with crescendo, there's so many things you can say about crescendo. Where's crescendo from? Crescendo is Italian, so you could say it comes from Italy. What else can you say? 3 syllables. What else could you say? Yeah, related to music. There we go. It's a musical term. You could give part of speech. Now I'm going to go back and give an honesty reality moment. The more experience kids have with language, the more characteristics they'll be able to come up with. I was working with a 1st grade class, and the kids, quite honest, the kid said it's a big word. I said, that's right. So we wrote big word because that's where they are in their knowledge. You see what I'm saying? Until they really have a grasp of syllables, they wouldn't say that. They say it's a big word or it's a little word. All right? Or they say it starts with they'll say sometimes it starts with a big letter, it starts with a little letter, or it has lots of vowels in it. So take the kids where they are. Those are still characteristics. Some kids may pick up on that this word ends in a long O. If they say that, I'm taking it. because that's pretty good if they notice. So the kids are going to do that, but I want them to do it last. Because often the kids will dig back into the dictionary, they'll have some conversations that will help them come up with those characteristics that I don't want them using this as a worksheet to start with. Now, gradual release model is critical, again. So how are we going to work this? The first box, I typically do, the first time we do this, we do it as a whole class. All right? The second box, color, I ask students to turn to a neighbor, and they do that one together, and they both have the same one on their grid. And then the last two, I ask them to do independent. See, do you see what I'm doing? That way, I don't have all these papers where the kids didn't know what they were doing. By doing the utilizing the gradual release model, I have far less problems by the time they come to me for assessment by doing it together. All right, so let's look at weather condition for a moment. You can look at the samples here, but I want everybody to have a private moment. What weather condition do you think crescendo is most like? Just think in your head for a moment, and then we'll share with you. Yeah. Okay, thunder. Okay, very good. You did the next step, because here's what you want to do. You never want the kids to just give their answer. What's most important is what's down there at the bottom. Why? That's the first thing I go to. When I'm reading them, I want to know why they're thinking what they're thinking, not just that they can give an answer. Because any kid can write down a weather condition, right? But it's the why that's most important. So she said thunder, and immediately followed it up with her textual evidence. It's got stronger, stronger, stronger. Now, here's the neat thing about this. For you to have made that connection, you really cognitively had to understand the concept behind crescendo. Does that make sense? See, vocabulary cannot be about students knowing definitions of words. They must know the concepts that the word represents. That's been the problem all along. We give them lists, they look up the definition, they know the definition, but they don't know what that means. Does that make sense? All right? So they will not understand words based on definitions alone. What has to happen as kids are reading is that the light goes on. Oh, wow, I love that the author used gently there. That means he really wasn't mad. Oh, yeah, that's great. So the light's going on. They're having these connections. And unfortunately, some of our kids read like this. And the light's never going off. So I want to show them, even with the language that the authors are using, that light's going on. And often it's inference. The vocabulary drives the inference, doesn't it? See, because readers infer, writers imply. If the writer implied nothing, there'd be nothing to infer. So I want that light bulb going on, going on, going on. So then they're going to move to color. What color is it most like? They're going to move to season. What season is it most like? And then, of course, they're going to move on to song. Song is the one that's the most difficult for actually sometimes adults, but kids do pretty well with it. But sometimes there are connections that seems like a big stretch for us. Does that make sense? Sometimes they'll put things, and if we're not very familiar with the song, we don't really get it. Here's an example. Comestible. The word was comestible. And it was actually a perfect connection, but it was kind of interesting when the kid put down. And the student put down Nellie. It's getting hot in here. And I said, well, he left it blank. He didn't tell why. And I said, well, you've got to tell why. I don't get what you're thinking. He looked at me like I was dumb as dirt. And he said, I didn't put it on there because I figured you would get it. And I said, okay, well, help me. And he said, well, Nellie, it's getting hot in here. And he said, when you cook in the kitchen and you're eating, it gets hot in the kitchen. I said, I get it. But you see what I'm saying? If they don't put why, you can't follow their line of thinking. Right? But song can also be genre. So it doesn't have to be a specific song. It can be a genre. This word is most like rock and roll. Now, let's go back to the ear. Is this exposing kids to words? Yes, and I'm just going to say, when you do this in the classroom, you're not going to give every kid the same word. Well, that would just be silly, wouldn't it? We have lots of words to cover. So what you want to do is have a pair of students do a word. And then what they're going to do is come together in a group and share their word. Does that make sense? All right? And it's in that sharing that you're creating episodes, but it's also here. See, when the kids come across crescendo again, they're going to think about what they put down that represents. They're going to think about that thunderstorm, or they're going to think about the color red, or whatever color you would come up with. So you're creating strong, strong episodes that are difficult to erase. What's easy to erase? The definition. That will go like that. But the deeper level, the episodic memory, is hard to erase. All right? That's why sometimes when kids learn things wrong for so long, it's so hard to erase. because it's become so entrenched, it's so episodic that they can't erase it. The neat thing about this is, though, after a while you can change. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. I was doing this session, and it was a history folks that are in here. The history person got so excited, he almost wanted to leave right then. He wanted to leave the session and go to his classroom and get ready for this, because what he said is, I can change this. Instead of doing weather condition, color, season, song, I can say, what landform is this word most like? What state is this word most like? You see what I'm saying? He then was turning it into a connection with his subject area. Then the math people went nuts, and they started talking things I didn't even understand, but they were having a moment to themselves, okay? So they were saying, oh, yeah, and we can do, and they were talking about geometric shapes and geometry, and, what geometric shape is this word most like? And I think that's the neat thing, that you can make it work for you. And you can also have the kids come up with their own. What holiday is the word most like? And you can change it up and do different things that work for you. Okay? So does that make sense? All right, so we're exposing kids to new words. Is it analysis? Is this analysis? In what way? Yeah, they're analyzing, and especially the characteristics. They're really having to analyze this word, and what kind of character traits does this word have? And then finally, rehearsal and review. By itself, it's not. Just the activity by itself doesn't necessarily rehearse or review that word, but it does rehearse and review other words that they're having to bring up in the writing. But it's not the same sense of rehearsal and review as that we saw in word storm. Does that make sense? Okay. So that R part is the weakest element. But is it episodic? Oh my. This is so strong in episodic memory, and that sharing component is so important, that they come and they share the different words that you have. Now, what words do you choose? Sometimes I get that question, well, what words would you do for word connection? Well, you have to be the boss of that, right? It can be, if you're doing SAT words for middle school, high school, then some of those more difficult words are perfect to use. It could be your list of vocabularies that you're using for a particular story. It could even be the spelling word, because by the kids focusing on them in such a deep level, it actually sticks longer. So whatever words you use, it doesn't matter. I have had this comment before, and I think it is important just to have a quick discussion before lunch, and then we're going to come back and do another metaphorical activity after lunch that uses chocolate, which of course, it's so important. All right? The conversation sometimes goes like this. Well, that's only one word. God, you took all that time for one word? Oh, yeah. All right? Because I want it to stick. And it may seem like I used a lot of time for that one word, but what's happening is we're helping kids understand how to learn words. Does that make sense? So see, they start taking these processes back, and when they have to learn words in another class the next year, they know how their brain processes information. So it's not so much time that I'm using with one word, I'm showing them how to make those connections and how important those connections are. The other thing is, if I don't spend that much time with it and they don't learn it and I have to keep coming back and doing it over and over again, I'm spinning my wheels and wasting. So it may seem like it's more time, but sometimes it's beneficial to spend a little more time instead of just driving by so quickly. And then it sticks, and then more words stick, and it becomes faster and faster. And you know what happens? When kids come across new words in text, they start making these connections on their own, and it really does solidify that problem. All right, so let's go